You should have stayed in prison." The young black woman froze as her former mentor stepped closer and blocked the only exit. Inside her coat pocket, a hidden phone call was still connected. Then the woman smiled and finally confessed. "I used your account. I moved the money, and I will make sure you never live long enough to prove it." Miles away, the tattooed Korean Mafia boss heard every word. He immediately sent his men to rescue her. But before they could reach the location, the phone suddenly fell to the floor, and the last sound he heard was her scream. Will he reach her before the woman who stole 2 years of her life takes everything else? Subscribe, like this video, and comment, "She deserves justice." Because the mafia boss everyone feared was about to become the only man standing between an innocent mother and death. 3 years earlier, Ariel Vaughn stood in front of a mirror in a rented room in Itaewon, buttoning a gray blazer over a white blouse, and told herself that 21 was not too young to build a life from nothing. She worked at the Seoul Immigration Support Office on the 9th floor of a gray government building near Yongsan Station, processing residency files for foreign nationals. The pay was modest, $1,800 a month, but it came with health insurance, and health insurance mattered because her daughter had just turned 2. The girl's father had left before she was born. Ariel never spoke his name out loud anymore. She had learned to say her father is not in the picture the way other people said, "It's raining today," flat and practiced, so the words could not hurt her twice. Her supervisor at the office was a woman named Kwon Seol-hwa, 48 years old, sharp-suited, soft-voiced, and endlessly patient with new employees. Kwon had trained Ariel for 6 months. Kwon had brought her rice cakes on her birthday. Kwon had told her, more than once, that she reminded her of herself at that age. Ariel trusted her completely. That was the mistake that cost her 2 years of her daughter's life. On a Tuesday morning in March, an investigator from the Financial Crimes Unit walked into the office and asked Ariel to step away from her desk. Her employee login had approved 4 wire transfers totaling $230,000 to shell accounts in Macau. Her password had authorized them. Her digital signature was stamped across 3 forged residency applications used to launder the funds. "I didn't do this," Ariel said, over and over, in the small gray interview room they put her in. "I didn't do this." Kwon Seol-hwa testified 2 weeks later. She sat straight-backed in the witness chair and told the court that Ariel had complained, more than once, about not having enough money to raise a child alone. She said Ariel had asked her, just once, whether the office ever did overtime pay under the table. It was a small detail. It was enough. Ariel had no money for a real defense lawyer. The court-appointed attorney met with her twice before the trial, both times for less than 20 minutes, and spent most of the second meeting telling her to consider a plea deal. "I didn't do it," Ariel told him, the same 3 words she'd repeated so many times they'd started to lose their shape in her own mouth. "That's what everyone says," the attorney answered, not unkindly, just tired. "The logs say otherwise." In the courtroom, Kwon Seol-hwa wore a navy suit and folded her hands in her lap like a woman at a funeral. She looked at Ariel exactly once, when she took the stand, and her eyes held nothing. Not guilt, not doubt, nothing at all. She mentioned money troubles. Kwon told the court. More than once. "I remember she asked about overtime pay that wasn't on the books. I thought nothing of it at the time. I understand it differently now." Ariel's court-appointed attorney didn't cross-examine hard enough to matter. The judge, a heavy-set man with reading glasses pushed low on his nose, looked at the transaction logs, looked at the mentor's testimony, and sentenced her to 5 years for fraud and identity misuse. Ariel didn't cry in the courtroom. She waited until the bailiff walked her into the hallway, until she saw her daughter's face, and then she couldn't hold it back any longer. Before they took her away, Ariel knelt down in the hallway outside the courtroom and held her daughter's face in both hands. "Mommy has to go somewhere for a while," she said. "But I'm coming back. I promise you, Seo-rin. I'm coming back." 2-year-old Ryu Seo-rin cried into her shoulder, and didn't understand a single word of the promise. Ariel left her with Han I-sul, a woman from her old building who had once babysat Seorin for free on nights Ariel worked late, and who agreed, without hesitation, to raise the child until her mother came home. Prison took 2 years. It took first words. It took the first day of preschool. It took 100 small mornings Ariel would never get back. No matter how well she behaved, no matter how many rehabilitation classes she finished, no matter how many letters she wrote that never got mailed because she didn't trust herself to sound like a mother anymore. She worked in the prison laundry for 11 months and then transferred into a vocational program teaching basic bookkeeping because it was the closest thing to her old job that the facility offered. She kept a single photograph taped inside her locker. Seorin at 18 months, gummy smile, one sock missing, and looked at it every night before lights out, the way other women looked at photographs of husbands or parents. Her cellmate, a woman twice her age doing time for a bad check scheme, told her once, not unkindly, "Behave like your freedom depends on it." Because it does. Ariel listened. She never missed a class. She never raised her voice at a guard, even when she wanted to. She counted days on a torn calendar taped above her bunk and crossed off every single one like it meant something. Because it did. Because of good behavior and a clean disciplinary record, she was granted supervised early release after 2 years instead of 5. She stood outside Han I-sul's apartment building with a small bag of her belongings and knocked on a door she used to know by heart. A 4-year-old girl opened it a crack, looked up, and hid behind Han I-sul's legs. "Is that my mommy?" the child whispered. The question went through Ariel like a blade. She didn't force it. She sat down on the floor of the entryway, cross-legged, and said nothing for a long time. She let Seorin stare at her from behind Han's legs for as long as she needed to. It took 3 weeks before the girl let Ariel carry her to bed. It took 2 months before she called her mommy without hesitating first. Ariel rebuilt it one bedtime story at a time. She never rushed it. She never cried in front of the child, not once, even on the nights it nearly broke her. Finding work was worse than she expected. Every interview went the same way. A hiring manager would smile through her resume, ask about her time gap, and then go pale when the background check came back. Some ended the interview on the spot. One man in Gangnam told her, without apology, that he couldn't have someone like that around client files. She took temp work, filing, translation proofreading, 3-week stocking shelves at a convenience store near Hongdae. Anything that paid enough for rent and daycare. One interviewer, a soft-spoken woman at a marketing firm near Sinchon, actually looked impressed by Ariel's resume until the background check came back. She called Ariel in for a second conversation just to deliver the rejection in person. "You're clearly capable," the woman said, twisting a pen between her fingers, not quite meeting Ariel's eyes. "It's not me. It's the client contracts. They run their own checks." "I understand," Ariel said, because she had learned to say it smoothly by then, even though nothing about it had ever once felt like understanding. Not the first time she'd heard it, and not the 10th. She went home that night, put Seorin to bed, and sat alone at the kitchen table with a stack of bills and a laptop open to a job board that had stopped returning results relevant to her experience. She allowed herself exactly 10 minutes to feel sorry for herself. Then she closed the laptop, opened it again, and kept looking. Then she heard about the opening. A businessman named Cha Do-hwan, 32 years old, ran 4 legitimate companies out of a glass tower in Gangnam: logistics, real estate, a private security firm, and an import company that everyone in Seoul quietly understood was a cover for something darker. 3 secretaries had resigned from his office in the past year. One had lasted 11 days. People said he ran a criminal organization behind the legal paperwork. People said his temper could clear a boardroom in under a minute. People also said that whoever could survive working for him would never have to worry about being underpaid again. Ariel had every reason in the world to be afraid of powerful men. She had also run out of other options. She wore her best black blazer to the interview, a cream blouse underneath, tailored trousers, and flat shoes she could walk fast in if she needed to. She sat in the waiting room of the 40th floor and practiced breathing slowly. The receptionist, a young man who introduced himself as Namjae Jayam, gave her a sympathetic look when he called her name. "Nobody's lasted longer than 2 weeks," he said quietly, like he felt obligated to warn her. "Just so you know what you're walking into." "Thank you for the warning," Ariel said. "You're welcome. Good luck." She thought of Seo Rin, asleep at Han Isol's apartment, and of the rent due in 11 days, and pushed her shoulders back before she walked through the door. When Cha Duhwan walked into the room, she understood immediately why 3 women had quit. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit with the top 2 buttons of his black shirt undone, and the open collar revealed the edge of tattoos that climbed from his chest up the side of his neck. He didn't smile. He didn't offer his hand. He sat down across from her, opened a folder, and read her criminal record out loud without looking up once. Fraud. Identity misuse. 2 years served. He finally raised his eyes. "Tell me why I should hand you access to confidential financial documents." Ariel kept her hands still in her lap. "Someone trusted my employee account more than I did," she said. "It cost me 2 years of my daughter's life. I don't make that mistake twice, with my own trust or anyone else's." Something flickered across his face. He didn't answer right away. "Does my reputation frighten you?" he asked instead. Ariel glanced past him at the desk visible through the open office door, a landslide of unfiled documents, 3 different colored folders stacked without order, sticky notes buried under loose paper. "Your filing system frightens me more," she said. Nobody in the room laughed, but the corner of his mouth moved, just barely, before he caught it. "You start Monday," he said. She became the best employee he had ever had. Within 3 months, she had reorganized his entire filing system, caught 2 accounting errors that would have cost him 6 figures, and learned to read his moods well enough to know which meetings to reschedule before he lost his temper in them. But he worked her without mercy. He called at midnight about documents that could have waited until morning. He rearranged her schedule with no warning. He corrected her mistakes, the rare ones she made, in the same flat, cold voice he used on men who owed him money. She never told him about Seo Rin. She was certain that motherhood, in his eyes, would look like weakness, and weakness was not something Cha Duhwan tolerated in the people who worked for him. For nearly a year, she lived on 4 hours of sleep a night. She skipped meals. She ignored a fever that came and went for 2 weeks because she couldn't afford to take a sick day. She told herself she was fine, the way exhausted people always do, right up until her body stopped agreeing with her. It happened on an ordinary Thursday morning. Seo Rin, now 5, was in the living room eating cereal and watching cartoons while her mother got ready in the bathroom. Ariel felt the room tilt sideways, reached for the sink, and didn't reach it in time. She collapsed on the tile floor and did not get back up. At the office, 3 important meetings fell apart within an hour because Ariel Vaughn had not arrived, had not answered a single call, and had not sent the documents Cha Duhwan needed for a 9 o'clock negotiation. He called her 4 times. Voicemail every time. By 10 o'clock, his patience had burned down to nothing. He opened FaceTime, jabbed her contact, and paced his office while it rang. The call connected. He didn't look at the screen right away. He was still scanning a document on his desk. "You are fired," he said, in the same flat voice he used to end a man's career in 30 seconds. Silence. Then a small voice, trembling, came through the speaker. "Please don't hurt Mommy." His hand froze over the desk. He looked at the screen. A little girl stared back at him, holding the phone with both hands, tears running down her face. She had overheard her mother say, days earlier, that her boss might fire her, and in her 5-year-old mind, fire meant something that burned, something that hurt. "I won't hurt her," he said, his voice dropping instantly, all the coldness gone from it. "I promise you." Where is your mommy right now? On the floor, the girl whispered. In the bathroom. She won't wake up. He didn't ask another question. He grabbed his car keys, pulled Ariel's home address from her emergency contact file, and left the office at a run. He found the girl kneeling beside her unconscious mother on the bathroom tile, trying to wake her with a plastic spoon because she had once seen someone do that on a cartoon. She wore two mismatched shoes and clutched a stuffed rabbit under one arm. Cha Du-hwan lifted Ariel off the floor and carried her to his car. Seo-rin climbed into the back seat without being told and buckled her own seatbelt. At the hospital, the doctor told him Ariel was severely dehydrated, dangerously exhausted, and fighting an untreated infection that had gone unchecked for weeks. If she had lain on that floor much longer, the doctor said, the outcome could have been very different. Cha Du-hwan sat in a plastic chair in the hallway outside her room and, for the first time in a very long time, felt something close to fear that had nothing to do with rival gangs or federal investigators. Ariel woke to the sound of hospital monitors and the sight of her boss sitting in a chair beside her bed, still in his charcoal suit, Seo-rin asleep on his lap with the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. For one panicked second, she thought she was dreaming. You're here to finish firing me, she said, her voice hoarse. No, Cha Du-hwan said. He shifted awkwardly, careful not to wake the child. I came to apologize. It came out sounding like a business announcement, stiff, rehearsed, entirely without warmth, because he had never actually apologized to anyone in his adult life and didn't know how the words were supposed to sound. I'll cover your medical bills, he continued. Full salary during your recovery. Reduced hours when you return. Ariel turned her face away from him and stared at the ceiling. Money doesn't fix the problem, she said. The problem is that you run your company like exhaustion is loyalty and fear is discipline. I'm not the only one running on empty in that building. I'm just the one who collapsed. Cha Du-hwan's jaw tightened, the way it did when someone told him something true he didn't want to hear. He looked down at his own hands for a moment, as if checking whether they were still the hands of a man capable of change. I built that company out of nothing, he said. I don't know how to run it any other way. Then learn, Ariel said, because the way you run it nearly cost me my life. And it cost my daughter a mother who wasn't lying on a bathroom floor. He didn't answer for a long moment, turning that thought over the way he turned over contracts before signing them, checking every clause for something he might regret later. What do you want? He finally asked. Reasonable hours. Sick leave that people actually feel safe using. Basic respect. She looked back at him. Not just for me. No one had ever spoken to Cha Du-hwan that way and kept their job. He didn't fire her. He didn't even argue. He simply nodded once, stood up carefully so he wouldn't wake Seo-rin, and left the room without another word. By the time Ariel was discharged 4 days later, 3 new policies had appeared in the company handbook: mandatory lunch breaks, capped overtime, paid sick leave with no penalty for using it. He visited the hospital every day of her recovery, always with some flimsy excuse. Once it was a document that could easily have been emailed. Once it was groceries, enough to feed an entire floor of the building, which he blamed on his assistant's miscalculation. Seo-rin, unimpressed by wealth, unimpressed by reputation, treated him like any other adult who happened to be in the room. Are those real tattoos? She asked him on his second visit, poking at the ink visible above his collar. Or did you forget to wash them off? They're real, he said. Do they hurt? Not anymore. She studied him with the suspicious squint of a 5-year-old evaluating a stranger. You have to read to me. Mommy's too tired. He read the book she handed him in the same flat tone he used to negotiate contracts. Seo-rin interrupted 3 times to inform him that princesses did not sound like angry businessmen. Try it happy, she instructed. He tried it happy. It sounded worse. She sighed the sigh of a very patient child dealing with a very slow adult and took over the reading herself. His security detail, standing near the door, had to look at the ceiling to keep from laughing. On his 3rd visit, Seo Rin decided he needed a job title. "You're the tattoo man," she announced. "But that's only your work name. Your real name can be Du Huan because mommy says it a lot." "That's very generous of you," he said. "You're welcome. Do you have any candy?" "No." "That's a bad first impression," she informed him, and went back to her coloring book, apparently unbothered by the fact that this was his fourth visit, not his first. On his fifth visit, he brought candy. Seo Rin inspected the bag with the seriousness of a customs officer, approved it, and declared that he had officially been promoted from tattoo man to Du Huan, who is okay. Ariel, listening from the hospital bed, laughed for the first time in days, and the sound of it did something to him he didn't have a name for yet. When Ariel went home, he drove them himself, 3 armed guards trailing in a second car behind them. Seo Rin complained the entire ride that there was nowhere sensible to put her juice box in his very expensive car. "There's a cup holder," he said. "It's too small." "Your car is bad at juice boxes," she said, with the flat finality of a court ruling, and he found, to his own surprise, that he didn't have a single argument prepared to counter a 5-year-old's verdict on his car. Over the following weeks, he found reasons to appear at their apartment that grew progressively less convincing. Ariel began to notice the pattern and said nothing, because some quiet part of her didn't want it to stop. She learned things about him that his employees never saw. He had grown up in a violent household where gentleness was treated as a weakness to be beaten out of a child. Some of the tattoos across his chest and neck, she suspected, existed to hide scars he refused to explain. He learned things about her, too. That she still apologized in her sleep for being gone those 2 years. That she kept a photograph of Seo Rin as a 2-year-old in her wallet, worn soft at the corners from being touched too many times. One evening, staying late to finish a report neither of them needed to finish that night, Ariel finally asked him the question she'd been avoiding for months. "What happened to your neck?" she asked, nodding toward the collar of ink that disappeared beneath his shirt. "The tattoos start high enough that I don't think it's just decoration." He went quiet for a moment, turning a pen over in his fingers. "My father used a belt," he said finally, flat, like he was reading it off a report. "Sometimes worse. The tattoos started when I was 17, mostly to cover what was already there. I kept adding to them because it was easier than talking about why I needed them in the first place." "I'm sorry," Ariel said. "Don't be. It made me who I am." He looked up at her. "I used to believe that unconditionally. I'm less sure now." "What changed?" "You collapsed on a bathroom floor because you were too afraid to ask me for a day off," he said. "That's not the company I meant to build. Somewhere along the way I turned into the thing I hated most as a kid, and I didn't even notice." Ariel didn't have an answer for that. She just reached over and set her hand briefly over his on the desk, and neither of them moved for a long moment. Small things shifted between them. He started sending her home before she asked. She started keeping headache medicine in her desk drawer for the migraines he never admitted to having. He smiled more around Seo Rin and denied it every single time one of his men noticed. When Ariel returned to work, she found her desk moved to a quieter corner, her hours shortened, and a new childcare room built 2 doors down from her boss's office. "It's for all employees," he said when she asked. The room was stocked with Seo Rin's favorite picture books, her favorite snacks, and a small television already tuned to her favorite cartoon. Ariel didn't say anything. She just looked at him for a long moment, and he looked away first. That same week, Seo Rin fell asleep on the office couch during a cartoon while waiting for her mother to finish a late report, and Cha Du-Hwan, reading emails in the chair beside her, fell asleep not long after. He woke to find his security detail lined up along the doorway, visibly struggling not to laugh, and a full sheet of colorful cartoon stickers pressed across his tattooed neck. Seo Rin, wide awake again and extremely pleased with herself, informed him that his tattoos needed more cheerful colors. "They're washable," she added helpfully, as Kong Mu-jin, the head of his security detail, turned fully around to hide his face. Mommy checked the package first. Cha Duhuan looked at himself in the reflection of the dark window, covered in cartoon rainbows and smiling suns, and said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Good work, he finally told her, deadpan, and Ariel had to leave the room entirely so he wouldn't see her laughing. The piece lasted exactly 6 weeks. On a Friday afternoon, an elegant woman in a designer dress arrived on the 40th floor for a private meeting, her heels clicking across the marble floor like a countdown. Ariel recognized her the instant she stepped out of the elevator. It was Kwon Seol-hwa, the mentor whose testimony had put her in prison. Cha Duhuan walked out of his office to greet her, and the words he said next landed on Ariel like a second sentencing. Ms. Kwon's family and mine have discussed a marriage contract, he said. It would strengthen my legitimate holdings considerably. Kwon Seol-hwa's smile faltered for exactly 1 second when she saw Ariel standing behind the reception desk, dressed sharply, clearly employed, clearly free. She recovered instantly and extended a manicured hand toward Cha Duhuan as though Ariel weren't in the room at all. I didn't realize you kept such interesting staff, Kwon said sweetly. Ariel runs this office better than the last 3 secretaries combined. Cha Duhuan replied, without hesitation. Kwon's smile tightened at the edges. She waited until he stepped away to take a call before she approached Ariel at the desk, her voice dropping to something venomous beneath the pleasant mask. You should resign, Kwon said quietly, before this becomes embarrassing for everyone. I'm not going anywhere, Ariel said. He's marrying me, Kwon continued. My family owns half the shipping contracts he needs to keep his legitimate businesses afloat. What do you have? A criminal record and a child no one asked about. Ariel finally looked up from the keyboard. You testified against an innocent woman to save yourself, she said quietly. I've had 3 years to think about what I'd say to you if I ever saw you again. I'm not going to waste it here, at a reception desk, while you pretend you're worried about my career. Kwon's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. You always were dramatic, she said. It's exhausting. Ariel's hands stayed steady on the keyboard, even though her chest was pounding. I already lost 2 years of my daughter's life because of what you did to me, she said, keeping her voice low and level. I'm not losing anything else because you're scared of what I might say. Kwon's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing else. She turned and walked into Cha Duhuan's office with her warm smile fully restored. Over the following weeks, the marriage negotiations continued on paper, but Cha Duhuan grew visibly more uneasy every time Kwon Seol-hwa entered the building. He watched her snap at a junior assistant over a coffee order. He watched her look through a delivery driver like the man wasn't standing there. He watched her stare at Seo-rin, who had wandered into the lobby one afternoon, with an expression closer to distaste than warmth. Are you marrying her because you lost a bet? Seo-rin asked him bluntly one evening, after watching Kwon leave the building. He almost laughed. He didn't answer her. His feelings for Ariel, meanwhile, had stopped being something he could explain away as gratitude. One night, he came back to the office with his shirt torn at the shoulder, blood soaking through the white fabric after a confrontation with a rival group had gone physical. Ariel, still working late, grabbed the first aid kit without being asked and cleaned the wound herself, her fingers steady even though her heart wasn't. His open shirt revealed the full spread of ink across his chest and up his neck. She tried not to stare. He noticed anyway. You're allowed to look, he said quietly. I'm trying not to, she admitted. The air between them went taut and warm. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair back from her face, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she stepped back. I won't be someone's secret, she said. Not while you're still negotiating a marriage with another woman. The words landed harder than she expected them to. He didn't argue. 3 days later, he canceled the contract with Kwon's family, despite furious objections from his own relatives and business partners. I won't marry a woman I don't respect to gain shipping contracts, he told them, and refused to discuss it further. Kwon Seol-hwa was humiliated in front of both families. She blamed Ariel, even though Ariel had never once asked him to end the arrangement. Cha Do-hwan's own uncle, a stern man who had helped raise him after his father's death, called him personally to voice his disapproval. "You're throwing away a shipping empire for a secretary with a record," his uncle said, not bothering to soften it. "I'm keeping my self-respect," Cha Do-hwan answered. "The shipping contracts can find another way in. I'm done paying for them with my own life." His uncle hung up without saying goodbye. It was the last conversation they had for nearly a year, until the wedding invitation arrived, and, to Cha Do-hwan's quiet surprise, his uncle showed up anyway, sat in the back row, and left without a word to anyone but a small, wrapped gift on the table for the bride. Cha Do-hwan came to Ariel's desk the following morning and said, without any of his usual guardedness, "You're the first person who's ever challenged me without wanting my money or my protection. I care about you," Ariel admitted, "but I won't confuse gratitude with love. Court me properly, or don't do this at all." He agreed. Their first date was at a restaurant he'd rented out entirely for privacy. Ariel made him reopen it to the public, because sitting alone in an empty dining room felt like something out of a horror movie, not a date. When her babysitter canceled at the last minute, Seo-rin came along and turned the evening into an interrogation. "Do you snore?" she asked him, over appetizers. "I don't know. No one's ever complained." "Can you cook?" "No." "Why do you own so many black shirts?" "They're practical. Crayons come in a lot of colors for a reason," Seo-rin informed him, and then ordered the most expensive dessert on the menu, on the theory that rich people didn't need to check prices. "Do you love my mommy?" she asked next, without lowering her voice at all, right as the waiter set down the bread basket. Ariel nearly choked on her water. Cha Do-hwan set down his fork very carefully. "I'm working on it," he said, which was, at that point, the most honest thing he had said to anyone in years. "Work faster," Seo-rin said, already reaching for a second roll. "I'm turning 6 soon and I want a bike for my birthday. Mommy says we can't afford one right now." "Seo-rin," Ariel said, mortified. "What?" "I'm just saying." Cha Do-hwan looked at Ariel across the table, fighting a smile he didn't quite manage to hide. "Duly noted," he told the child. It was, by every objective measure, the strangest first date of his life. He found himself smiling through most of it anyway. Weeks later, the peace shattered again. A significant sum of money went missing from one of his legitimate companies. The transaction logs, the security footage, and the digital access trail all pointed directly at Ariel. It looked exactly like the fraud case that had sent her to prison 3 years earlier. She braced herself for him to turn on her the way everyone else had. Instead, he studied the footage frame by frame, his jaw tight, and said 4 words that undid her completely. "It's too perfect." Ariel stared at him. "What? You don't make mistakes like this," he said, pointing at the timestamp on the screen. "You color code invoices for fun. Whoever set this up wanted it to look exactly like your old case. That's not carelessness. That's a signature. Everyone else who's ever looked at evidence like this looked at me first," Ariel said quietly. "Not the evidence." "I'm not everyone else," he said. For the first time in her life, a powerful man had believed her before she had to beg him to. Cha Do-hwan quietly hired an independent investigator, a sharp former prosecutor named Yoo Hae-jun, to examine both the new theft and the old immigration fraud case that had put Ariel away. He kept most of it from Ariel at first, afraid that whoever had framed her the second time might be watching her closely enough to notice if she changed her behavior. It backfired. Ariel found out he'd hired an investigator without telling her and confronted him in his office, furious. "You don't get to protect me by keeping secrets from me," she said. "That's not protection. That's control with better manners." He absorbed that without arguing, which was rare for him. "You're right," he said. "I'm not used to trusting anyone with the whole picture." He showed her everything Yoo Hae-jun had found. The new security footage had been digitally altered, a frame-by-frame splice job good enough to fool a casual review, but not good enough to survive forensic analysis. The missing funds had been routed through the exact same financial network used in Ariel's original conviction 3 years earlier. Whoever built this timeline made one mistake, Yoo Hae-jun told them, spreading printouts across the conference table. They reused an account structure from your original case instead of building a new one. It's efficient. It's also traceable, if you know what you're looking for. Why would someone reuse the same method? Ariel asked. That seems careless for someone this organized. Because they didn't think anyone would ever cross-reference a closed case from 3 years ago against an active one, Yoo Hae-jun said. They were counting on nobody looking backward. Cha Do-hwan tapped the account numbers on the page. Cross-reference every transaction in Ms. Vaughn's original case against every account Ms. Kwan has touched in the last 5 years, he said. All of them. I don't care how long it takes. It took Yoo Hae-jun 9 days. The overlap, when it finally surfaced, was undeniable. Someone had recreated the crime almost exactly. Kwon Seo-hwa, meanwhile, grew increasingly desperate. She warned Cha Do-hwan privately that marrying a woman with a criminal past and someone else's child would destroy his reputation among the families that mattered. My reputation survived bullets, he told her. It'll survive loving an innocent woman. Realizing she was losing every angle, Kwon approached Ariel directly one evening in the parking garage beneath the office building. Sensing danger in the woman's tone before she said a single threatening word, Ariel slipped her phone into her coat pocket and called Cha Do-hwan, leaving the line open. Kwon's composure finally cracked. You were supposed to stay in prison, she hissed. I picked you specifically. A single mother, 21 years old, no money for lawyers, desperate enough that no one would question the motive. It was perfect until you got out early. I never thought you'd get out early, Kwon said, her voice climbing. Good behavior. Of course. You were always good at performing whatever the room needed from you. You mean I was good at surviving what you did to me, Ariel said. She admitted everything. The original fraud, the forged transactions, the false testimony that had sealed Ariel's conviction. She admitted recreating the crime inside Cha Do-hwan's company, hoping to send Ariel back to prison before the wedding contract could be permanently canceled. You have a daughter now who calls him daddy, Kwon spat. You have my life. The one I was supposed to have. I built that company's compliance department from nothing and got pushed out for a younger face and a sad story. That's not what happened, Ariel said. You built a career on lying about a 21-year-old girl who trusted you. On the other end of the open call, Cha Do-hwan heard every word. When Kwon realized her voice had carried further than the parking garage, panic took over. She lunged at Ariel, going for the phone, then for anything within reach that could silence her permanently. Ariel fought back hard, but Kwon was taller, stronger in that moment, and driven by desperation. Cha Do-hwan arrived within minutes, his men flooding the garage behind him. They pulled Kwon off Ariel before real damage was done, though Ariel would carry a bruise along her collarbone for weeks afterward. He wanted to make Kwon disappear the way he'd made problems disappear his entire adult life. Ariel stopped him with one hand flat against his chest. I want justice, she said. Not another crime with my name attached to it. He respected it, even though every instinct in him screamed otherwise. The recorded confession, combined with the forensic evidence from the doctored footage and the financial trail, reopened Ariel's original case within the month. Her conviction was overturned. Her record was formally cleared. The immigration office issued a public statement acknowledging she had been wrongfully convicted. It didn't return the 2 years she'd lost. Nothing could do that. But it gave her back her name, and it gave her daughter the truth, that her mother had never been a criminal at all. A few months later, after the case closed and the dust settled, Cha Do-hwan brought Ariel back to the small apartment where he'd first found her unconscious on the bathroom floor. He got down on one knee in the same hallway. The worst phone call I ever made led me to the two people who taught me how to actually live, he said. I'm not promising you money. I'm promising communication, partnership, and a home where neither of you is ever treated like a burden. Before Ariel could answer, Seo Rin's voice rang out from the living room. Say yes before his knee starts hurting. Laughing through tears, Ariel said yes. They married soon after in a modern ceremony overlooking the Han River. Ariel wore a fitted white gown with a long train. Cha Duhuan wore a tailored black tuxedo, though the tattoos across his neck remained visible above the collar no matter how the tailor tried to hide them. Seo Rin walked her mother down the aisle in a small white dress that matched her mother's gown. Carrying a basket of flower petals, she scattered with far more enthusiasm than technique, and announced to the entire room, through the officiant's microphone before anyone could stop her, that she was personally responsible for introducing the two of them. I did the FaceTime call, she told the guests proudly. You're welcome, everybody. The room laughed. Han Isul, seated in the front row, wiped her eyes and mouthed a thank you to Ariel across the aisle. During the vows, Seo Rin loudly reminded everyone present that the groom had once tried to fire her mother. It was the biggest mistake of my life, Cha Duhuan said, and meant it. The second biggest was almost letting my own fear talk me out of this one. Ariel laughed through tears she hadn't planned on shedding, and when he slid the ring onto her finger, his hands that had signed contracts worth millions, hands that people twice his size flinched away from, were shaking. Marriage brought tenderness neither of them had expected and arguments neither of them had planned for. Ariel moved into Cha Duhuan's home in Songbukdong, but refused to let marriage turn her into someone who took orders at home the way employees took orders at the office. Dinner is at 7, he told her, the same tone he used with his staff. Dinner is not a military operation, she told them back. They learned to argue without retreating into silence, to apologize without turning it into a negotiation. Seo Rin adjusted to the new house faster than either adult, colonizing half of his private office with toys and informing his security detail that they were required to knock before entering her business meetings. A new complication arrived 4 months into the marriage. A man named Baek Si-hyun showed up at Cha Duhuan's company reception desk, asking for Ariel by name. He was Korean, 26, and the man Ariel had briefly dated when she was 19, before Seo Rin, before the fraud, before any of it. He had never known about the pregnancy. His controlling family had intercepted every message Ariel sent him after they broke up, convincing him she had simply vanished. He'd found an old, unsent letter of hers, years later, buried in his mother's belongings, and it had taken him months to track Ariel down. He was stunned to learn he had a 5-year-old daughter, and stunned again to learn the mother of his child was now married to Cha Duhuan. Ariel allowed him supervised time to get to know Seo Rin, but she made the boundaries clear. You don't get to walk in and demand to be called daddy, she told him. She has to choose that on her own time. Seo Rin, for her part, remained unmoved. She called him by his first name and nothing else. The first time Baek Si-hyun took her to the park, alone, supervised from a bench 30 feet away by Kong Mu-jin, she spent the entire hour asking him rapid-fire questions instead of playing on the swings. What's your favorite color? Blue, he said. What's your job? I work for a shipping company. Boring stuff. Paperwork mostly. Do you have other kids? No, just you. She considered that for a long moment, swinging her legs off the edge of the bench. Okay, she finally said. You can come to the park again, but you have to bring snacks next time. Duhuan always brings snacks. I'll bring snacks, Baek Si-hyun promised, and something in his chest loosened for the first time since he'd found that unsent letter buried in his mother's drawer. You missed a lot of years, she told Baek Si-hyun once, with the blunt honesty only a child could get away with. Duhuan didn't miss any of them. So he wins. Baek Si-hyun didn't argue with her. He just nodded slowly and said, You're right. I did miss them. I'd like to stop missing them now, if that's okay. It was the first thing he said that made Ariel think he might actually be trying, rather than performing an apology the way Kwon Seolwal once had. Baek Sihyun's wealthy family, furious that their bloodline's only heir was being raised by a former mafia boss, threatened a custody suit, arguing the household was unsafe. His mother called Ariel directly, once, her voice clipped and cold over the phone. "You'll destroy that girl's future keeping her in a house with a criminal record and a man like that," she said. "We can offer her a name, stability, a future without whispers following her." "She already has stability," Ariel answered. "She has two parents who show up. That's more than most children with respectable last names ever get." The woman hung up without another word. Cha Do-hwan's first instinct was to intimidate the family into silence. Ariel stopped him cold. "She can't grow up thinking fear is the answer to every problem," she said. "Not from you. Not ever." They hired a respected family lawyer, Shin Tae-yeol, who reviewed the case in a single afternoon and told them plainly that no court in the country would remove a 5-year-old from a stable home with two working, present parents to hand her to grandparents she'd never met. "They're betting on intimidation, not law," Shin Tae-yeol said. "Don't give them a reaction to work with. Give them paperwork." They gave them paperwork. Months of custody evaluations, home visits, and character statements from teachers, doctors, and the child care staff at Cha Do-hwan's own company followed, each one affirming what Ariel already knew, that Seo-rin was thriving. Eventually, Baek Sihyun rejected his family's aggressive approach altogether, apologized for the years he hadn't been there to search harder, and agreed to build a relationship with his daughter slowly, without disrupting the stable home she already had. "I don't want to fight you for her," he told Cha Do-hwan directly, the first real conversation the two men ever had. "I want to know her." "Those aren't the same thing." "They're not," Cha Do-hwan agreed. "As long as you remember that, we won't have a problem." Baek Sihyun nodded, and for the first time, offered his hand. Cha Do-hwan shook it. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something steadier than the suspicion that had defined their first meeting, and over the following months it grew into something close enough to respect that Seo-rin stopped needing to referee dinners between them entirely. The fight tested the marriage in ways neither of them expected. Ariel worried, quietly, that she'd brought more complication into his life than he'd signed up for. He worried, just as quietly, that she'd eventually choose the more socially acceptable family, biological father, respectable name, none of his baggage. They finally said all of it out loud one night, sitting on the floor of their bedroom long after Seo-rin had gone to sleep. "Biology doesn't make a father," Ariel told him. "She considers you her father because you're the one who actually shows up. Loving both of you scares me more than any enemy ever has," he admitted. "I know how to survive a man with a gun. I don't know how to survive losing this." Ariel took his hand. "You're not going to lose it," she said. "Not unless you let fear talk you into pushing us away first. That's the only way this ends badly." He was quiet for a long moment, turning her hand over in his. "My father used to say love makes a man weak," he finally said. "It took me 32 years to understand he was wrong about almost everything, including that." "What was he right about?" she asked. "Nothing I can think of," he said, and for the first time in a long time, they both laughed about something that used to hurt. Months later, Seo-rin climbed into his lap after dinner and asked, very seriously, whether she could start calling him daddy. He nodded, said something about needing to check on dinner, and left the room. Ariel found him a few minutes later sitting alone in his office, insisting there was something wrong with his eyes. With her name cleared, Ariel went back to school. She completed an advanced certification in corporate compliance and financial crime prevention through a program in Seoul, finishing at the top of her class at 26. She studied at night after Seo-rin fell asleep. Textbooks spread across the kitchen table, highlighters in 4 colors. Cha Do-hwan quizzing her from flashcards he'd made himself even though he barely understood half the material. "What's the difference between structuring and layering?" he asked her once, squinting at his own handwriting. Structuring is breaking large transactions into smaller ones to avoid reporting thresholds, Ariel recited, not looking up from her notes. Layering is moving money through multiple accounts to obscure the origin. You wrote, layering on that card, by the way. There's an E. I run 4 companies, he said. I don't need to spell. You need to spell if you're going to help me study, she said, and threw a highlighter cap at him, which he caught without looking, a reflex left over from another life entirely. She graduated with the highest marks in her cohort. Cha Du-hwan sat in the 3rd row of the small auditorium. Their infant son asleep against his chest in a carrier Seo-rin had picked out specifically because it matched none of his suits, and clapped louder than anyone else in the room when her name was called. She stopped being just his secretary. She built an independent compliance division across every company he owned, and her expertise began catching the exact kind of fraud that had once destroyed her life before it could destroy anyone else's. Cha Du-hwan, meanwhile, began dismantling the parts of his empire that had never been legal to begin with. He sold off the dangerous holdings, closed the operations connected to smuggling and extortion, and reinvested everything into hotels, logistics, technology, and real estate. The transition wasn't instant, and it wasn't clean. Some of his former associates didn't take kindly to a man walking away from an organization that had made them wealthy for over a decade. There were tense meetings behind closed doors, veiled threats disguised as concerned advice, and at least one late night where Cha Du-hwan came home with a new bruise along his jaw that he refused to explain in detail. You don't have to protect me from the specifics, Ariel told him, pressing an ice pack to his face at the kitchen table. But you do have to tell me if we're in danger. That's not the same thing. We're not, he said. It's handled. Handled how? He was quiet for a moment. The way these things get handled, he admitted finally. I'm trying to make sure it's the last time. It was. Within a year, the last of his old connections had either accepted a generous buyout or backed away entirely, unwilling to test how far a man with nothing left to lose, but his family was willing to go to protect it. Together, they founded a foundation offering legal support to wrongfully accused workers and employment programs for people leaving prison with nowhere to go. Ariel became known publicly as a respected compliance executive, not the woman a tabloid had once mocked for a conviction that was never hers to carry. Their family grew alongside their businesses. Ariel became pregnant with their first child together. Cha Du-hwan turned instantly and thoroughly overprotective, reading parenting books cover to cover, inspecting every meal she ate, and seriously proposing that they remove the staircase from the house entirely. Removing the staircase creates more problems than it solves, Ariel told him, not for the first time. Their son was born healthy that spring. Seo-rin, now 7, took her role as big sister seriously, though she complained early and often that the baby did absolutely nothing around the house. He just lies there, she told her mother, arms crossed, watching the baby sleep in his bassinet. I was doing chores by his age. You were not doing chores at 3 months old, Ariel said. I was supervising, Seo-rin said with great dignity, and marched off before anyone could argue. Cha Du-hwan took to fatherhood a second time with a seriousness that startled even his own staff. He installed baby monitors in 3 rooms he didn't need to. He fired, briefly, and against Ariel's strong objections, a nanny candidate for showing up 4 minutes late to an interview, and hired her back the next day after Ariel pointed out that soul traffic was not a character flaw. You can't run a household like a hostile takeover, Ariel told him, not for the first time. I'm adjusting, he said. Adjust faster, she said, echoing, without either of them quite noticing, the exact words their daughter had used on their first date years earlier. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, and the once silent mansion in Songbuk-dong filled permanently with bottles, school bags, cartoon-themed songs, and the particular chaos of a household with 3 children under 10. Cha Du-hwan attended international meetings with baby food staining his $2,000 suit and a pink diaper bag slung over one shoulder. His tattooed neck still made strangers nervous on sight. His children treated him like furniture built specifically for climbing. His assistant, Nam Jae-jayam, learned to keep a spare shirt in the office closet at all times, on the grounds that the boss cannot walk into a shareholder meeting smelling like formula, and I refused to explain that to the board again. One afternoon, his head of security, Kang Moo-jin, walked into his office to find the feared Cha Du-hwan sitting cross-legged on the floor, hosting a tea party with 3 stuffed animals and his youngest daughter, wearing a plastic crown that read princess in glittery pink letters. Kang Moo-jin said nothing. He simply backed out of the office slowly, the way a man backs away from something he is not equipped to process, and closed the door behind him without a word to anyone. Word got around the building anyway. Cha Du-hwan pretended not to know how. Ariel was named Chief Compliance Officer across the entire legal business group after negotiating a major international partnership herself. He worked beside her from then on, never above her, and made sure everyone in the building understood the difference. He still called her my secretary when he wanted to provoke her. "I sign your performance reviews now," she reminded him every time. Years passed. Ariel became a confident wife, mother, an executive who no longer lowered her eyes when strangers recognized her name from the old headlines. She started speaking publicly, at conferences, at universities, once in front of the National Assembly, about wrongful conviction, workplace identity theft, and the near impossible climb former prisoners face trying to rebuild a life afterward. Cha Du-hwan sat in the audience at every talk, their children beside him, and never once managed to hide how proud he was, no matter how much he claimed to dislike public displays of emotion. At one conference, a young reporter asked Ariel, in front of 200 people, whether she ever worried her past would follow her children. "It already has," Ariel answered, without flinching. "My daughter has heard every version of my story, including the ugly parts. I'd rather she hear it from me, standing on a stage, than whispered about her in a hallway someday. Silence is what let this happen to me in the first place. I don't do silence anymore." The room applauded longer than the moderators seemed to expect. Cha Du-hwan, sitting in the 3rd row with their son asleep against his shoulder, clapped the longest of anyone. Kwon Seo-hwa remained in prison, convicted on multiple counts of fraud and attempted assault. She wrote Ariel a letter, years into her sentence, asking for forgiveness. Ariel didn't visit. She read the letter once, folded it, and decided that forgiveness didn't require reopening a door. "I let go of the anger for my own sake," she told Cha Du-hwan that night. Not for hers. Cha Du-hwan completed his transition away from the criminal world entirely. His legal companies kept expanding, and he became known, oddly enough, for creating jobs and rehabilitation programs rather than fear. He never became a soft man. He still intimidated grown executives in boardrooms, still wore his tattoos like armor beneath expensive suits. But his children knew the truth, that the feared businessman could not resist a bedtime story or a badly drawn family portrait taped to his office wall. One afternoon, 10-year-old Seo-rin asked her mother to finally explain the story of the day she'd answered the phone. The family drove back to the old apartment, now renovated into affordable housing for struggling single parents through the foundation they'd built together. The building looked nothing like Ariel remembered. Fresh paint, a new elevator, a small plaque near the entrance bearing the foundation's name, listing free childcare hours and a legal aid hotline for tenants who needed it. A woman in the lobby, maybe 23, balancing a toddler on her hip, smiled at them without recognizing who they were. "This used to be my apartment," Ariel told her, gently. "2nd floor. It's a good building," the young woman said. "They helped me with my lease when I lost my job last year. Didn't ask a lot of questions either." Ariel smiled. "That's the point," she said. They rode the new elevator up together, Seo Rin holding her mother's hand. Cha Du-hwan carrying their youngest on his hip the way he carried her the very first week she was born, like she might shatter if he loosened his grip even slightly. Standing outside the same bathroom, Ariel told her daughter she had collapsed and couldn't wake herself up. Cha Du-hwan admitted he had called that morning fully intending to end her mother's job. Seo Rin laughed when she finally understood she'd misunderstood the word fired all those years ago. Then the moment turned quiet. "Please don't hurt Mommy," he said, repeating the 4 words that had broken something open in him years earlier. Those 4 words made me actually look at the person standing in front of me instead of the employee I thought I was firing. They led me here, to the hospital, to the truth about what happened to your mother. Eventually, to all of you. "I wasn't trying to build a family," Seo Rin said, grinning. "I was trying to stop you from setting Mommy on fire." The whole family laughed. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Cha Du-hwan sat beside Ariel on the back porch and asked whether she ever regretted answering his job posting all those years ago. "I didn't answer your call," she reminded him. "Our daughter did." He kissed her. "Hiring you was the smartest decision I ever made. Trying to fire me was the second smartest," she said. "It's what brought you to our door." The story closes on a modern family portrait session in their backyard. The baby tugs open his father's collar, revealing more tattoos underneath. Their youngest daughter cries because someone touched her snack. Seo Rin, now the self-appointed manager of the entire operation, orders everyone to smile at once. The once feared Cha Du-hwan obeys without argument. Han I-sul, still close with the family after all these years, watched from the sidelines with a camera of her own. The way she had watched Seo Rin grow from a frightened 2-year-old left in her care into the confident, bossy 10-year-old currently ordering a former Mafia boss around his own backyard. "You did good," Han I-sul told Ariel quietly, setting her camera down for a moment. "Both of you." Ariel looked across the yard at her husband, tattoos visible above his collar even in a plain white shirt, letting their youngest daughter braid a single ribbon into his hair with badly uneven fingers, letting her, because he'd never once told any of his children no when it came to something that small. "We got lucky," Ariel said. "No," Han I-sul said. "You worked for it. Luck is what got you through the door. Everything after that, you built yourselves." The photographer finally got everyone still for exactly 1 frame before the baby started crying again, and the moment dissolved back into noise, laughter, and the particular chaos that had become, against every original prediction anyone might have made about a feared Korean mafia boss and a wrongfully convicted single mother from an immigration office job that paid $1,800 a month, simply their life. The photograph captures a wealthy, imperfect, deeply loving family, built on a wrong assumption, a frightened child, and 4 innocent words that broke a hardened man's heart wide open.